Alright, so for this script now, we are going to web scrape the team's depth chart. And it's basically going to act like the team roster as well. So again, let's take a look at the website we are going to use, and that is of course the CBS Sports website. I really like their website. They had a lot of good information that I thought was very easy to scrape, and it made life a lot easier for me. So this is what their website looked like. But I do want to note that scraping this was a little bit of a challenge, but it was really a decision I had to make. So as you can see, we have our table here. We have our offensive positions. We have our quarterback. We have our position column, which is fine. Our starter column, which is fine. Our second string player, which is fine. And then we have our third string players. Now, this is where it gets a little bit interesting because there is a couple of ways I can deal with scraping this table. Because the column for the third string players are not broken up, so we can have multiple players under one column. And that's not really going to work in a database sense. So we have to try and figure out a way to correct this. So one of the options, or I'm going to go through a couple of the options I thought about and why I chose the most logical option in my opinion. So the first option was to web scrape the rows multiple times depending upon how many players there are in the third string column. So we would, since there are two players in this third string column, I would scrape this row again, starting with Ian Brook, and then I would scrape the same row again, but with Trevor Siemian. The other option I was thinking about is that we could just basically scrape the row how it is and just leave it as that. Very simple and easy to do, but I really didn't think that was the best way of doing it. And the last way I thought, which was the most logical, is to actually split it up into more columns. So in this third string column, in my head or how I visualized it, Ian Book would be here, but then I would create a fourth string column and it would hold Trevor Siemian. And this is the option I went with. So now we only have to scrape one row. So it'll be Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, Ian Book at the third string position, and then fourth string position, Trevor Siemian. And I believe this is the most logical way of doing it. Although we're going to have many more columns, especially when we get to positions where they have a lot of backup players like the wide receiver position, tight end, cornerbacks. That's fine with me. I think it's logically better and it looks better to have each player as their own string. So now we could take a look at the script. So of course we load in our libraries and packages, set up the variables in preparation for our loop, create the empty data frame. So we are going to start with this website first. On this website, it contains all of the NFL teams on the CBS Sports website page. And when we go to inspect, we can further inspect and it'll take us directly to that team page on the CBS Sports website. So we are going to read in this URL and parse it. After that is done, we are going to look for this tag, the attribute, and then the attribute value of team name. Then we could move on to our loop. So I say for teams in team link, we are going to perform these steps. So we're going to create a link where we have the cbssports.com website, and then we have the hypertext for that specific team, plus the depth chart, because that's how they have their link set up here. If you see, it's New Orleans Saints, and then depth chart. Then we are going to add 1 to Z. Then we'll print the link. And then we create a new URL called URL2. And then we are going to read that web page now and then parse it. And then we are going to determine how many rows we have and then the number of positions. So while B is less than the number of positions, we are going to create two variables. So we have the number of players in a row, but then we are going to retrieve how many players are in this first variable, because it's going to be used in our next loop. So while I is less than or equal to the number of players, we are going to set up these variables, and it's basically going to web scrape the position, the starter, the second string, and the third string player. And then we perform a try beginning on the second string player all the way up to the 13th string player. Once that is done, of course, we are going to create a stage and data frame, and then we have our variables within that stage and data frame where we assign them equal to be the text of the variables that we created earlier, like the position, the first string, second string, and the player name, of course. So once that is done, we are going to append it to the data frame on the outside, and we are going to set the sort equal to false, just to make sure that when we're looking at the data frame, everything is in order. Then of course, I always like going with a print statement just to see where everything is at. After that, we are going to set I equal to the number of players. 1 is going to be added to U. 1 is going to be added to S as well. And then if I is equal to the number of players, we are going to add 1 to B at or reset I to 0. And then we are going to basically reset these variables here with an empty string. And then if B is greater than or equal to the number of positions, then we are going to reset the following variables here. Which basically means that we are going to move on to the next team. And you can see this is what our print statement looks like. Basically going to print the team name, the starter at each position, and then the link for that depth chart for the specific team. So this is what our data frame looks like and what the final CSV file is going to look like. So you can see we have the team, the position, first string, second string, third string, fourth string, and then all the way up to the 13th string. In some cases, we may need it depending on the position. Like as you can see, the Seahawks, they have a whole bunch of receivers, and then other than that, we should be fine. Like the Miami Dolphins have a whole bunch of receivers as well. So once that is said and done, we then export it to a CSV file. And this is another script that is going to be ran daily for us. So with that out of the way, we can move on to the next script.